Quitting your job and becoming a freelancer may sound like it's pretty risky. But what if I was to tell you that actually it can be a great way of insulating yourself against a recession or an economic downturn? By having multiple clients, can you make yourself more recession-proof, not less? That's what we're going to be talking about in this week's episode. I'm Jeremy Klein, and this is Change Work Life. Hello and welcome to Change Work Life, where we're all about beating the Sunday evening blues and enjoying Mondays again. If you want to know how you can enjoy a more satisfying and fulfilling working life, you're in the right place. When we're in an economic downturn, probably the last thing you're thinking of is quitting your job and becoming self-employed. But could becoming a freelancer in fact be the safer option? When you have greater control over your time, who you work for and how much you get paid, can you become more recession-proof, not less than when you're an employee? That's what we're discussing this week with my guest, Dorothy Hollabaugh. Dorothy started freelancing in 2017 and used her experience to found a digital advertising agency. She's co-founder of digital media company The Gig, through which she helps freelancers build their own profitable, fulfilling and recession-proof businesses. Dorothy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Why don't you start by telling us a bit more about The Gig and why you started it?
Absolutely. So, The Gig really evolved out of reflection on my own career journey over the last 5 years or so. I had a very, twisty-turny type of path. I thought that I was going to be an accountant. That was the plan all through school. And then really, right as I was graduating, I realized that I was going into accounting for all of the wrong reasons. I was not excited about it. It was really just to kind of tick the box of what I thought success meant. And, I basically decided to jump ship and give up the job offer that I'd, worked my butt off to land, and ended up going to work for a startup here in Chicago instead. And this was a very early stage startup. I was their fourth employee. They were brand new. And I worked there for just under 4 years and saw that company go from 0 to 10 million in annual revenue. They ultimately went on to, sell for multiple 9 figures. And it was really an unbelievable educational experience and kind of what it looks like to scale a business from, the ground up. Even though I had studied finance and accounting, a lot of my role at that company, in a startup like that, everyone wears a lot of hats, and I wore a lot of marketing hats. That was, really my primary focus. And so when I left that job, I'd just gotten very spoiled, and, having my first role out of school be something where I had so much flexibility, so much autonomy. I could work remote when I wanted to, before that was a common thing. And, I really wasn't willing to give up the level of autonomy and control that I, felt I had in that job and, go work somewhere that was going to make me be in an office 5 days a week in Chicago. And so that was really how this idea was born of trying to do something on my own. Why don't I see if I can, make money, without getting a normal job? And, I'd always had a little bit of an entrepreneurial bug. I had a vision that eventually I might want to start a business, but I didn't think I was going to do it at 25. Right. So, that decision to, let's just try, let's just, see if I can make this happen. It ultimately turned into the start of my journey as a freelancer. I freelanced by myself running Facebook advertising for clients for about 2.5 years, and then started hiring, and, that morphed into, what is today a 7-figure agency. So the idea of The Gig was really about, how do we help that person who's sitting where I was, almost 6 years ago, who is, looking to create more freedom, create more flexibility in their lives, have that uncapped income. How can we help them to, do that more effectively, faster, and, really kind of avoid a lot of the common pitfalls and mistakes?
I've got to ask, accountancy has a reputation possibly for being a bit dull, but it is quite prestigious. What was the reaction of your friends and family when you said, no, I'm not going to be an accountant, I'm going to go and work for this 4-man startup?
They thought I was nuts. Yeah, I mean, my parents, as you can imagine, were not thrilled. My friends were supportive, but definitely, thought that I was a little bit crazy. And, I think it really came down to, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew I didn't want to do that. And really what had happened was I had stumbled into the world of personal development and, really just started to expand my mindset on what was possible for me. And for the very first time, I asked myself the question, is accounting just going to make me money or is it going to make me happy? And that I felt was a resounding no. And so, in terms of kind of what people thought, I think the general chorus I was hearing at the time was, it's so risky. It's so risky. And, I'd really love to kind of flip that on its head for people, especially if you are sitting in a position like I was, where I needed to go find a new job. And, I was fortunate that, I was pretty confident that I could get a job quickly if, things really hit the fan and like I needed a job in the next 4 weeks. Like I was confident that I could, get some sort of job, even if it wasn't what I ultimately wanted. I could get something that could, pay my rent temporarily. So really, whereas everyone was saying, it's so risky to try to do something on your own, I thought, well, what's the risk? I try to do something on my own. Either it works or it doesn't work. And then I have to, go look for a job, which was exactly the situation that I was already in. So, I think that exercise of playing out, okay, what is the worst case scenario if I try? That can be very freeing when you realize, it's not quite as scary as you maybe built up in your head.
In 150 plus episodes of the podcast, I don't think anyone's come on and said, is this something that's going to make me money or make me happy? But that's such a beautifully pithy way of putting it. Absolutely love that.
Yeah. And to be clear on that too, it's not, is it going to make me money or is it going to make me happy? It's, is it going to do both? Because I think often we can get into this place of feeling like we have to choose. And, I think that's unfortunate.
Let's start at the beginning. How would you define freelancing?
Yeah, I mean, freelancing is really, when you are being contracted by companies, by business owners to do work on a contract basis. So they're not hiring you as an employee. They're hiring you for a specific project or, on retainer to, month after month complete the same task for them. So you're not working for just one boss, one company. You have several different companies that you are contracting with, making up your total income.
And is there anything that looks like freelancing, but perhaps you wouldn't define it that way? So you often hear of people leaving companies and then going back to them as consultants. And it turns out they're actually doing pretty much exactly the same job, just on a different basis. I mean, does that count as freelancing or is that something a bit different?
Well, I believe it does because, what they're doing then is they are, perhaps doing the same thing they were doing for that company, when they were an employee. But now that they are not an employee, they have the option to go and do that for 2 other companies at the same time. And they have the ability to dictate the terms and, dictate the rate. And if that company, doesn't like those terms or doesn't like that rate, well, then they can, look for clients that do. So it's really about the flexibility and the control to really kind of dictate how it's going to go and, choose clients that are aligned with that vision.
And just expanding on that, and I know we've touched on this, but can you talk to the advantages of being a freelancer versus being an employee?
Absolutely. I think it definitely takes a, certain type of person and personality to really love freelancing. And I can talk about, the other side of this coin, but really what attracts most people is this idea of, flexibility and control, really having true freedom in your life in terms of who you work with, when you work with them, how you work with them, and what you get paid. And, that was something that, I was especially attracted to. I mean, I'm definitely someone who is motivated financially. I, really can't stand the idea that, what I can earn is, arbitrarily capped by somebody. And so, I think the desire to earn more is definitely, I would say a massive motivator for people. And then the desire to have flexibility to travel, to work remotely, and to really set their schedule and, fit work into their life in the way that, feels elegant and feels, feels good to that individual person. So, I think it's the uncapped income. It's the, the freedom and the flexibility to decide your schedule, to pick your clients. You're able to, if you don't like a particular client, if you don't like working with someone, you can't fire your boss very easily, right? You pretty much have to go pick a new job. But you can very easily fire a freelancing client that isn't, showing you respect or, treating you the way that you want to be treated. So I think those are probably the biggest things.
And turning to the other side of the coin, what are the disadvantages of freelancing when compared with being an employee?
Yeah. So there is such a gift to being in control, but then it also means that you are in control, right? So it means that no one is handing you, that project on a silver platter. You have to go out and get it. And that's something that, some people are, very good at and enjoy doing. And then there's other people where that terrifies them. And they're like, I would hate to be, kind of in charge of knowing, where my next paycheck is from. So it really is a thing about self-awareness and kind of understanding, who you are and, if that's something that is going to light you up and really motivate you, or if it's, something that, frankly, you have no interest in and, you prefer, that stability to the potential that comes with the uncapped income, the control, all of those things.
And this idea of freelancing being a route to uncapped income, that's something that's, I think, going to be new to a lot of people, quite surprising, this idea that, hang on, what you mean I'm not just limited to earning $50,000, $80,000, what it is. I can earn pretty much the sky's the limit.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's something where, I think often, back to that idea of, kind of control and, really understanding, where the power is in, in terms of, what's going to happen to you. We often think about a traditional job as being that stable, secure option, but really, your boss or your boss's boss or someone who doesn't even know you can, wake up one day and decide that you no longer have a job. And so, I think there is this, really kind of beautiful power that comes in the ability to, choose your own clients and set your own rates and know that, there isn't any person who can tell you that, you don't have work, you don't have income, you don't have a job. And then, as you gain more experience and as you, become more established as a freelancer, your ability to charge more, your ability to, hire, to leverage your time and get help, that is really what allows you to be able to make, as much as you, ultimately choose. And that's definitely been my experience. Like, it did not take long. I would say probably 3 months into my freelancing, journey, if you will, I had, well eclipsed what I was making at that startup.
As we record this, there's a certain amount of economic uncertainty in the world. And, will we go into recession? Won't we go into recession? If so, how long, how deep, that kind of thing. You've already touched on how an employee might be vulnerable in a recession in that they might be employee of the month, but if their company's looking to cut 10% of its workforce, then they can be one of those people quite easily. Flipping that on its head, though, how might being a freelancer make you recession-proof? Presumably, in an economic downturn, then companies are spending less on freelancers in the same way that they're cutting down costs with employees.
Right. That's a great question. And I think if you can grasp this concept, it is so powerful because, first, it's important to understand that in a recession or any type of economic downturn typically does not hit all sectors of the market or all industries equally, right? Usually there's some industries, some, large sectors of the market that are hit really, really hard. And then there's other, areas of the market that, may actually be doing very well. So, for example, COVID, I think is a perfect illustration of this where, companies that were positioned to support remote work or, these different types of tools that just, Zoom, for example, like that we're talking on now, absolutely skyrocketed, during the pandemic. And so, what is really cool about freelancing is, you are as a freelancer, you are typically, choosing what we call a high income skill. So that's how we, describe it at the gig. And, these are really skills that allow you to, help businesses make money and, for you to get compensated for that. So things like copywriting, things like managing, advertising, graphic design, sales, all of these things are skills that can be applied in many, many different ways. So if you think about, a recession and you are, say that you are a mortgage broker in a recession where housing is hit really, really hard, like we're seeing, right now, trying to pivot your career and, go into something that isn't related to housing, it's like trying to turn a cruise ship, right? It's going to be slow. It's going to take a lot of energy, a lot of work. But if you are a freelancer, say you are a copywriter and, you have been working with companies in the real estate industry, writing copy for them, and all of a sudden that same, recession hits the market. Well, you are a copywriter. So instead of, having to kind of turn this massive cruise ship, it's like you're in a speedboat and you can pivot and go apply that same skill that you already have to a company that is thriving during that time. So, it's really about your ability to, not have to change what you do. All you have to change is who you are doing it for. And, we saw this in my agency when COVID hit. We had a couple of clients, our bigger clients, who were advertising events, and they shut down overnight. So we lost, I think it was 40% of our revenue in the week, following COVID really hitting. But within 3 weeks after that, we had more than replaced that revenue with new clients that were, thriving. I mean, e-commerce was huge at that time. So, it's really about this idea of don't change what you do, just change who you're doing it for.
That leads on to quite an interesting question about finding your niche or finding your niche, depending on however you pronounce it. Because there's a lot of talk about being known as the person who helps ... So you might be the copywriter who specializes in writing copy for the hotel industry or for, I don't know, car sales or something like that. So if you are, say, the copywriter to the hotel industry and then hotels are taking a complete battering, how do you kind of pivot when you've developed such a strong brand and reputation in one particular area?
It's a great question. I think there's a couple different ways to approach that. So, first, to kind of share a personal example, the way that I always approached niching down in terms of, my work as a, it was Facebook advertising that I really started in, was that I didn't specify what type of company I was working for. I made all of my, positioning about the attributes of those companies. So because I come from this, finance and accounting background, I'm very analytical. I'm very much a numbers person. And so, I really position everything around, I help data-driven companies to, profitably scale their customer acquisition. And, obviously there's a lot more that, kind of went into that. But, I really worked with a variety of different types of clients for really the first 2 years. I worked with a car dealership. I worked with e-commerce brands. I worked with digital product sellers. And that was really an incredible way to kind of hone my skills and figure out what I liked and what I was drawn to. And ultimately digital products ended up being, what is now kind of the niche of our agency. But we don't necessarily kind of close the door to other types of businesses, if they do kind of fit the core criteria that, we are really looking for. But if you are someone who has really branded yourself, niching down is incredibly powerful. And it's something that I really, really recommend to people, because it helps you to get traction. It helps you to attract clients. But in the freelancing world, there are these marketplaces like Upwork, for example. That's definitely my favorite one, where you have all of these different people, who are posting, who have a need right now that they are looking to hire and fill. So if you, if your niche is, real estate, and all of a sudden real estate companies aren't hiring, then the thing that I would recommend to do is go to these freelancing platforms like Upwork, where you can, really just be presented with a sea of people, all of whom are looking to hire right now. And, you can really look to get some small projects with people in other industries and, start to build up from there. And honestly, it's not as hard as that may sound, because if you're a great copywriter, you're a great copywriter. And what makes you a great copywriter isn't so much your knowledge of real estate, it's your knowledge of human psychology and persuasion and how to craft copy in a way that is going to be compelling and is going to inspire action. And, typically, it's the same thing with advertising an ad account. What makes you good at that is really has nothing to do with, the niche that you maybe have focused on from a marketing standpoint.
Okay. Let's go back to basics a little bit and talk to the person who's maybe just taking their first tentative steps, or maybe they've just found out about freelancing as a thing. What jobs are particularly well suited to freelancing?
So at the gig, we talk about these high income skills, and there are a couple of criteria that, I feel are very important, in order for something to be a great opportunity, as a freelancer. And the first one is that it gives you leverage to earn more. So this is what we're talking about, with this uncapped income potential. And this is really about charging flat fees versus hourly. So I'll give you an example to kind of illustrate this. If you start freelancing and you're getting paid $50 an hour, it's going to take you 100 hours to earn $5,000. And there's nothing you can do about that. That's exactly how much you're going to make. But if you charge $5,000 for an entire project and you can get it done in 35 hours, then your effective hourly rate has just shot up to $142 an hour. So that is really what, the key is to having that uncapped income and being able to earn more. It's charging these project rates. So that's the first criteria. You need to be able to charge your clients in that way. The second criteria is that it can be done from anywhere. Now, this might not be important to some people, but, I think for a lot of people who are interested in freelancing, that is something that is very attractive. It's that flexibility. It's that, opportunity to, travel, to, work from anywhere you want. And then the third criteria of these high income skills is proximity to the sale. And here's what I mean by this. It's about your clients having the ability to trace sales, revenue, profits directly back to your work. So to give you some examples of this, maybe you're a graphic designer and sales are coming from a page that you designed, or, subscribers are reading an ad that you wrote and posted on Facebook, or, you're doing, high ticket sales and a prospect is literally speaking to you on the phone before signing up. These are all things where, it becomes possible to, really measure your results and the impact that you're having on a company. And, this can get very, very powerful, right? Because, it might be absolutely like, I'll give you an example from our agency. We have a client whose bill, like their retainer with us this month, is going to be $50,000. And when I first started freelancing, it was incomprehensible to me that anyone would pay anybody, $50,000 in a single month to, manage their ad account or do something like that for them. But if they're making $1 million in profit, from that work, they will be glad to pay you $50,000. Now that's an extreme example. Obviously, it took a long time to kind of get to that place, but the concept stands. When clients are making money and they can really trace that back to what you're doing, it becomes very simple to justify your rate. So those are the type of skills that you want to focus on.
I'm hearing people in my head who are thinking, oh, well, it's clearly not for me then, because I'm in a profession where it doesn't have any or all of those characteristics that you've just described. What are some of the ways that someone can perhaps be creative in terms of starting freelancing, but starting from a place where it doesn't seem as though they're in a profession or a job which necessarily lends itself, that doesn't have those characteristics. So I don't know, maybe someone's a teacher, maybe someone's a doctor or a nurse, something like that. How might someone like that approach this?
Right. So that's where I was. When I left that startup, I'd been exposed, to advertising, but, they had agencies that ran their ad accounts. I had nothing to do with that. And so when I decided to try to do something on my own, I had absolutely no idea what that was going to be. And it was a process of, probably about 4 months where I was, I didn't really have savings built up. So I was, renting my apartment out on Airbnb to pay my rent and buy myself some time, staying with friends, like literally doing whatever I could to just buy time to figure out what I wanted to do. And, I had never run a Facebook ad in my life. I'd never done anything with that. But about 4 months into really kind of floundering and trying to figure out, what I could do to make money, I was invited to this Facebook ads workshop. My former boss had a ticket to this 3-day event and he couldn't go. And, he offered me the ticket. And it was really one of those things where I was like, okay, I know that I'm analytical, right? I know that I am, good with numbers. I know that I like data. I think this is something that I could be good at. So when I started freelancing, I had no experience directly in that skill. And so, when you're a beginner at insert skill here, what you're typically going to be doing when you start is you're going to be working with beginner business owners who, can't afford to go, spend, a ton of money to hire an expert. And so, they will be interested in, really partnering with you and betting on someone who's, saying, hey, I'm new in this. I've been studying. I've been, working on developing this skill. And, my rates reflect that level of experience, but, I'm going to work harder for you than, anyone else will. I'm committed to this. And that's really what it was for me in the beginning. I was finding clients who were, willing to take a bet on me. And then, I was working day in and day out to, study and practice my chosen skill. So say you're a teacher and, maybe you're an English teacher and you like to write, but you've never done copywriting. My co-founder, I'll say, he was a massage therapist and copywriting was what he chose. So, it doesn't need to be an English teacher. It could be anyone. You can, get a program like, for example, there's a course out there called Copy Hour, where every single day you're handwriting a proven sales letter to, build that muscle memory and those skills and understand, persuasion and copywriting. If you're doing paid ads, maybe you're, literally looking at ads in your Facebook feed and, studying what are they doing, adding the ones that capture your attention to a swipe file, graphic design, maybe you're creating a mock Instagram story for one of your favorite brands. So, it's really just about choosing what you think is most appealing to you, practicing, studying, starting to take on, small projects, small clients, and then figuring out, is this aligned? Do I enjoy this? And either, pushing forward or potentially trying something else.
And if you're starting out, where do you find this first client?
Yeah. So Upwork is by far my favorite freelancing platform. It's where I got started and where honestly my agency still gets clients from Upwork today. To kind of set the stage for someone who may not be familiar, Upwork is a freelancing platform where businesses or entrepreneurs who, need something done, they're able to go and post a job. And then freelancers can submit proposals, for that work. And there are, over 5 million client accounts on Upwork and over 100,000 open postings every day. So what I started doing when I was brand new was, I just took, it was really only about half an hour a day, I would say, where I had my saved searches set up, for, kind of the keywords around Facebook ads and, paid traffic. And I would just, scroll through the posts of, listings that hit those searches and submit proposals for anything that seemed aligned. And that process of going through, all the open postings, submitting proposals using, my template that I'd created, I would personalize it for each one. That took about half an hour a day. And like I said, it was within 3 months that I was able to eclipse my income from my previous job. And so even if you're brand new, this is something that's really powerful. And we actually have a step-by-step training that goes into my exact process, my 5-step process that I follow to get clients from Upwork and help people who are brand new to freelancing brand new to the platform to do it too. And so, we produce content like that in the gig. And, I think Upwork is really the best place to start, for really a variety of reasons.
Two potential objections, which I'm interested to hear you address. One is that with a platform like Upwork, you are competing against people who may be in somewhere with a much lower cost of living, and so they can charge less and still make good money for where they are. So if you're doing this as a newbie in a place with a higher cost of living, like the US, like the UK, then it's tough to compete against that. And also you're competing against people who have already got the star ratings because they're already there, and you're starting and you've got no reputation, nothing behind you. So, it's that chicken and egg situation why people are going to hire you. So could you address those 2 points?
Yeah. So, first there are, to the location question. So if you're in the United States, there's actually a toggle that you can flip on in your searches for US only. So these are clients that have specified in their job posting that they are looking for a freelancer located in the United States. And, if you're in the UK or, you're in Australia or wherever you are, there are a lot of people who want to work with someone who is in their time zone, that, they don't have to worry about potential communication barriers or, any sort of other factors. And so, there really is such an abundance of opportunity on these platforms that, that really has never been an issue for me. Like, there are people who are looking for the cheapest possible way to get it done. And honestly, those probably aren't the clients that you want. You want someone who's looking for quality, someone who's looking for, other things than just the cheapest. Right. And so, there's this meme that, I see circulated on the internet every so often about freelancing, where it's like the $500 client is the one who's asking you, all right, how are you going to change my life? How are you, what are your guarantees? What are your, how are you going to revolutionize my business? And the $10,000 client is the one that says, hey, wire sent. It's the higher paying clients that are often a lot more enjoyable and simple to work with. So that's one thing I'd say. And then the reality is that everyone starts brand new on the platform. And the way that you build up to get those star ratings, to get that top rated badge on your profile is by taking smaller jobs, doing, executing at a high level, and then, really making a personal appeal to that client to post a good review for you. And, this is something that I did. I mean, our Upwork training is, really for someone who is brand new, doesn't have a profile on Upwork. And to give you another example, my husband actually, he recently decided to start freelancing doing podcast production. Right. So he's been managing his own podcast for some time, and he thought, hey, I enjoy this editing. I could do this for other people. So about 2 months ago, he started on Upwork with a brand new profile. He now has 7 recurring clients for podcast editing. So this is something that is very doable, really as a result of the just volume of opportunity that exists on these platforms.
Someone who's looking to go from employee to freelancer, it's going to be a transition of sorts. At one end, it could be quit your job, go into freelancing 100% with, no kind of runway between. At the other end, you allow yourself a bit of time where you're doing both. What factors can influence the speed of transition? And allied to that, how can you make that transition faster if that's what you want to do?
I think this comes down to self-awareness, similar to some things I shared earlier, are you the type of person where, you thrive under pressure and you're really going to rise to that? Or, are you someone who would really prefer to take a slower route and, have a little bit more stability and security in the way you make that transition? So for me, I had left my job. I did not have a paycheck. Like I said, I was literally running my apartment on Airbnb to buy myself time and get my rent paid. And so I didn't have the luxury of doing it the slow way. And so, for me, I'm the type of person where you put my back against the wall. Like I'm going to fight. I'm going to, make something happen. And so that really worked for me to kind of have this high pressure. Okay, I've got to do this and I've got to do this now and make it work. But I would say for the vast majority of people, I wouldn't recommend that, unless that, if that's your situation, then let's go. It's very possible. But, if you have the opportunity to start to do this on your nights and weekends and start to build, especially if you don't have the existing skill set, right? So I chose the hard path, right? I actually ended up hiring a coach to kind of help me, learn this skill faster, which was another reason I had to make it work because I was on the hook to pay for this coach. I'd like literally I put the first payment on a credit card and I was like, all right, I've got to do this. So I really rose to that pressure. But if you're someone who has a full-time job that you can tolerate, that you can take the next 6 months to build that skill, do that daily practice an hour, every evening before you go to bed and start to build up, those smaller projects and build that, that reputation on a platform like Upwork, that is definitely the, kind of the smoother way to get started, I would say.
I guess when you move into freelancing, there's going to be the thing that you do, whether it's copywriting, video editing, whatever it might be. There are presumably other skills, though, that it would be helpful to master as a freelancer, which are outside of the whatever it is that you're doing. And those might be skills that you wouldn't need as an employee. Can you talk to what those skills might be?
Yes, I love this question because this is a huge focus for us with our content in our daily email newsletter, because you're right. There is what you do, but then there are all of the skills that go into being a business owner, because that's really what you are now, right? So, how do you handle your taxes? How do you price yourself? How do you handle a client who isn't treating you well? How do you, kind of filter and qualify people and, package your services, all of these different things that really aren't about the kind of core competence of the skill. They're about, how to sell that skill, how to work with clients, and, how to be a business owner. And then I think the other side of it is how to work for yourself, because that really is a skill, on its own as well. How do you kind of create structure where there is none? How do you, work effectively as a solopreneur? So, these are all absolutely things that are necessary to, be mastering at the same time you're mastering the core skill, which is why we make it such a big focus of our content in our email newsletter.
And if you're someone who likes the idea of freelancing, but doesn't like the idea of some of these skills, so maybe selling yourself or that kind of thing, they're someone who, they just want to do the job. They don't really want to get into self-promotion or whatever. Does that automatically rule someone out of doing this, or are there other ways that you can approach this?
To be honest with you, it's something that is going to, like, if you really hate that, if you really hate sales, if you really hate, kind of talking to people and putting your offer out there, it's going to be much harder. That is going to be a challenge that you're going to have to overcome. What I would say is that not everyone likes that stuff in the beginning. Not everyone feels competent at those things in the beginning. So I think for a lot of people, it's the fear of what that might feel like or what that might look like that is really behind that emotion. And, once you actually kind of get yourself in the trenches, what you realize is that, it's sales is a value exchange, right? And, as you continue to hone these skills and get better and better at what you do, you get to this place where, that you can help this person on the other end of the phone that you're looking at over Zoom. You have something that can create this result that they are looking for. And so, once you have that confidence, which really just comes from putting in the reps, it becomes much more comfortable to sell, because, you're not just kind of like shamelessly like self-promoting. You're offering someone the solution to a problem that they have raised their hand and said, I have this problem. Please help me. Right. So it's a different mindset. I think a lot of it is just, really understanding, working as hard on your mindset as you are on your business. So that I would say is the majority of people. If you're someone who genuinely you're like, nope, it's not a mindset issue. It's not, it's not a practice and confidence thing. Like, I hate this, then freelancing probably isn't for you. And I think that self-awareness is really important, regardless of, kind of what field you're going into or that you're, in currently.
You touched on this briefly, but With anyone who's starting their own business or going freelancing, I see this question come up all the time. How do you know what to charge?
That is a loaded question, right? I think it's really important to, do what you can to make connections in the industry or in the skill that you're working in, right? So, if you are getting started as a copywriter, we've kind of used this example, meet other copywriters, join, I recently came across a wonderful woman, Amy, who has this group on Facebook called the Copywriting Girls Club. And everyone in that Facebook group are, female copywriters, looking to grow their freelancing businesses. So that I would say is the first thing, is try to find community of other people who are, freelancing in the same skill that you are. Upwork has these community boards where you can find these things and, see what other people are charging. Go on Upwork, create a client profile and do a search for, what you're looking to do and see what other people are charging, what those kind of ranges are. And so when I started, it was really this function of, okay, I want to charge, something reasonable enough that it's reflective of my skill set. But, I think it's critical to realize that you are far more likely to underprice yourself than overprice yourself. So, do that research, my opinion is take whatever price kind of comes to you intuitively from that process, add 50% and try to start there.
Okay, so you mentioned your own course, which I'll definitely put a link to that in the show notes. In terms of other resources which have either particularly helped you in your freelancing journey or which you routinely recommend to other people, what comes to mind that listeners might want to take a look at?
I love that question. I would say podcasts have been a massive part of, my development as a freelancer and just my journey as an entrepreneur, because filling your mind with, positive propaganda, for lack of a better term, is really, really critical to, forging forward when things are hard. Right. And so, one podcast that has been incredibly impactful for me is the Chris Harder Show. I stumbled upon that podcast when I was first getting started, and it's all about money mindset and entrepreneurship. And now fast forward to the present day, I'm actually in Chris Harder's mastermind group, which has just been revolutionary for my business. But his podcast, I listened to it for years before I ever met Chris. And that is a resource that I would definitely recommend to anyone getting started.
And where can people find you? Where would you like them to go?
Yes. Well, so you can find us at thegig.io. We publish a daily email newsletter that is completely free, that is filled with, tips on how to work with clients, how to work for yourself, how to land clients and how to grow your specific skill. So, the first two skills that we're starting with are copywriting and paid ads, where we're actually going to be introducing, separate newsletters, for those skills specifically. But the core newsletter is applicable to anyone freelancing in any type of, online skill. And I mentioned earlier that training on how to get clients from Upwork, my step-by-step process. I would love to give that to your audience for free. And they can get that at thegig.io/VIP. When you opt in for the newsletter there, we'll send that course straight to your inbox.
Fantastic. Well, as always, links to all those in the show notes. Dorothy, all I can say is thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your knowledge.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun. I appreciate you having me.
Okay, hope you enjoyed that interview with Dorothy Hollabaugh of The Gig. One thing I liked about this conversation was that Dorothy is pretty clear on what sort of skills she thinks are well suited for freelancing. She talked about these high income skills, the skills for which clients are going to pay you well. But that doesn't necessarily stop you from starting out as a beginner. Her suggestion was you can begin with beginners. You start that way, you build up your skills, you build up your reputation, and that way you can move to working with bigger clients. I also loved how Dorothy said that make me money or make me happy isn't necessarily a choice you have to make. You can have both. Freelancing isn't necessarily the only way you can do it, but a lot of people seem to limit themselves with the belief that it's either one or the other. Show notes are, as always, on the website at changeworklife.com/155. That's changeworklife.com/155 for a full transcript, summary of everything we talked about, and links to the resources that Dorothy mentioned. And if freelancing is something you're thinking about but you're not sure whether it's right for you or even what skill you'd like to offer, then that's something that I might be able to help you with. One of the things I do with my coaching clients is go through their work history and pick out the skills which they're really, really good at and also which they quite enjoy doing. And it's led to some really interesting places. I've recently been working with a client who was working in IT for a large company. Well, he's now exploring the fashion industry. If you'd like to find out more about how I might be able to help you, then visit changeworklife.com/coaching. That's changeworklife.com/coaching. And if you'd like to arrange a chat with me, there's a button there where you can set that up. One of the advantages of freelancing, which Dorothy mentioned, is the possibility of working from anywhere, the digital nomad lifestyle, which we've talked about on the podcast before. But one thing we haven't addressed is how you can do that when you've got children. If you've got kids who are school age or younger, how realistic is it to take them away with you to a foreign country so that you can work elsewhere? How do you look after them? How do you make sure that they're being educated, that they're socializing? Well, in 2 weeks' time, that's exactly what we're going to be talking about. So make sure you've subscribed to the podcast if you haven't already. And I can't wait to see you in 2 weeks' time for that episode. Cheers. Bye.